Hi, I'm Ruby Kramer. I'm an enterprise reporter for The Washington Post. I wrote this story as part of our Deep Read series, which showcases narrative journalism here at the Post. This is a story about the anger that surrounds the immigration crisis in America right now. One of the places where I saw that playing out was not a major city. It was a very small town in Massachusetts, just 11,000 people, where the state was getting ready to move migrant families into a vacant prison. I went there for about 3 weeks to report this story, and what I found was a town that was trying to figure out whether to accept this news or to fight it. As I was reporting this story, I recorded audio of many of my conversations and interviews. You'll hear some of that audio throughout the piece. Okay, here it is. Norfolk, Massachusetts. Here was the town where Kevin Roach grew up. Empty sidewalks, a coffee shop, a pharmacy, 2 pizza parlors, 2 ambulances, 2 roundabouts, and no grocery store. A small, quiet town, people in Norfolk said. Pleasant. Safe. Nothing much to do, and that meant nothing much changed from one morning to the next or the next until this morning, when Kevin woke up and knew that the town would be different by the time the day was over. He got in his car and drove toward Main Street just before 7 a.m. Main Street ran from one end of Norfolk to the other, 4 miles in all, and it led to the auto repair shop where Kevin, 60 years old, had worked since he was 12, first for his father and now alongside his own son. He passed the line of houses he saw every morning, which were the same except for the ones that had new signs in the yard. They read, "Norfolk Prison Shelter, not safe for anyone." At the end of Main Street, razor wire was being removed from a chain-link fence around Bay State Correctional Center, an unused low-security state prison half a mile from Kevin's shop. At the foot of the fence, rows of thick coil lay in the grass. Security guards stood at the front gates. Cribs and diaper kits sat on the floor of the prison gym. Clean white sheets lay on the beds. Later that day, the state would reopen the prison as an emergency shelter for pregnant women and families with children, most of them migrants who had been granted parole at the border to legally enter the country and who were in the process of applying for asylum or temporary protected status. 24 families, or about 75 people, would be the first to arrive. When he got to the shop, Kevin told his son Adam,
"No, there's only 24 of them.
There's only 24 of them.
Today? 2 buses, yeah.
2 buses, yeah. Kevin had heard that the people coming would be Haitian migrants who were living in Terminal E at Logan International Airport, about 30 miles northeast in Boston. They had arrived among record numbers of people crossing the U.S. border since 2022 and had been placed on a wait list to enter the state's overcrowded shelter system. In Massachusetts, caseloads of families seeking shelter had more than doubled since the year before. And now there were more people waiting at Logan Airport every day, and no room for them all. The state had opened new shelters in towns across Massachusetts, but none so big in a town so small as the one planned for Norfolk, population 11,000. By the fall, Kevin had heard, as many as 405 people could be living at the prison. The door opened, and a man handed Kevin a piece of paper about a protest scheduled for later that day on Main Street. It read, "Signs will be provided. Bring anyone you can." Kevin folded the paper in half and placed it on the counter. It had been 6 weeks since the state informed Norfolk about its plans, and he had never seen the town's residents so angry, either about the shelter or at one another. 3 days before the news, he'd been elected to the town's small governing board, and since then, some of the anger had been coming into his shop. People wanted to know how the shelter would affect their school system, their taxes, their 911 call volume, their sewage, the houses and cars they liked to leave unlocked at night. And now some of them wanted to know if Kevin was going to the protest that evening at the center of town.
Absolutely not.
Kevin told a man stopping by the shop. The man said,
"Let's see how many people they can get. Never ends here, never ends."
You don't think they're getting some walk-around money when they show up here?
Adam asked.
Where are they going to walk to?
A mechanic named Jack said.
They don't walk up to Dunkin' Donuts and Walgreens.
Another mechanic who had been listening said,
Imagine if there was a sign saying, Jesus loves you and so do we. Think the warm welcome
Shut
then?
up.
Good afternoon, Norfolk Auto. This is Kevin.
In the garage, the car lift screeched, raising a truck toward the ceiling.
The wheels are junk?
The wheels are junk, Kevin asked, before the door opened and another customer walked inside to talk about a woman who had accused him of spreading paranoia and fear about the shelter.
You know, she said, we don't need conspiracy and, what did she say, xenophobia and all this. Right. Using all the right phrases and words, you know.
Kevin laughed, but said nothing. The man went on.
You got to go to the tribal model. You take care of your own first, right?
Again, Kevin said nothing. He kept his eyes on the window. Here was the town, about to make room for 24 new families. He watched the cars pass by, scanning the road for signs of a bus.
Do you think you're intimidating me?
3 weeks earlier, Kevin had looked out across an auditorium as people began to yell. He had told himself that as the newest member of the Norfolk Select Board, composed of 3 elected officials who set the policies for the town, his job at that night's town meeting was to remain neutral and open. Seated on the stage, he tried to keep a blank expression on his face as a panel of 4 state officials took questions about the plan to convert the prison into a shelter. In the aisle, people lined up for a turn at the microphone.
I am angry,
one woman said. Her son, who was disabled, had lost his health insurance. She told the state officials on the stage.
I'm an American citizen. Americans should get help first.
Shouting filled the room. Before the panel could respond, the next person approached the microphone and began to speak. The woman who'd just spoken yelled from her seat.
Ma'am, please.
On the stage, the chair of the select board, Jim Lehan, rose from his seat.
Please, we're going to get nowhere if we act this way. Give them a chance to answer the question, please. That's all we're asking.
But the meeting went on just like that, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, for more than an hour. Now another person was at the microphone, telling the state about her own son, who was 5 years old and allergic to bees.
What happens if Lucas gets stung?
What if the ambulances in Norfolk were busy at the shelter instead of tending to the town?
What do I say? I'm sorry, Lucas, we tried.
And at this stage of the game, they're coming in 2 weeks?
A man said.
And you can't tell us
anything.
But there were some things the state officials on stage had been able to tell them. That these were families who really have nowhere else to go. That the site would be reserved for pregnant women and families, including children up to age 21. The occupants could include a combination of people seeking asylum and homeless Massachusetts residents. And the shelter being set up for them at Bay State Correctional Center would be temporary, open for 6 to 12 months.
It's a simple yes or no.
A woman at the microphone said now.
Can you today guarantee every single person in this room that within 12 months, this site will be closed?
Our plan is to close it within 6 to 12 months.
One of the state officials repeated.
So that's a no? That's a no. All right. Thank you.
A few rows back, Thais Bingham Hickman, 41 years old, decided to say something. She was a black resident in a town that was 85% white, and she'd been reading more and more racist comments on the town's community Facebook page. She wondered what kind of language the kids in town might be hearing from their parents. She thought of her own 2 sons and worried that they, along with the children at the shelter, might be bullied at school. Now she faced the panel on stage.
And I just want to apologize for the disrespect that you've received thus far.
Behind her, some people began to clap and nod. Then, shouting and booing broke out across the room. The next woman to speak approached the microphone and turned around to face the town.
I would, as a white person, ask that this majority white room can think about before we boo the single black resident who has said that we have been extremely disrespectful.
Now there was groaning and more booing, and a few people stood up to leave.
I'm truly disgusted.
People yelled back at her. The meeting was nearing the 2-hour mark. The select board chair stood again.
If we can't be more respectful of each other, we'll call this meeting off.
People are angry, someone shouted. From his seat, Ron Tibbetts, a 70-year-old Episcopal deacon, thought he'd heard the words rapist and pedophiles from somewhere in the crowd. When it was his turn to speak, he told the officials on stage that despite the anger in the room, there was a, quote, quiet group of people who were ready to welcome the families to the town.
They have decided to stand up and say these are families like our families, children like our children, men and women looking for a way of life.
They're not, a man in the audience said, cutting him off.
They are.
He turned to the audience now and asked that quiet group of people to stand up.
I would ask if you are courageous enough.
In the back of the room, another man began to yell.
Doesn't agree with what's going on here to stand up.
Okay, but that's okay.
And people across the room rose from their seats.
Good.
Through it all, Kevin watched from the stage. Then he felt the eyes in the crowd shift. A man in the audience was talking to him.
The new selectman?
The man said.
Time to step up and fight the push that these guys are pushing on you. It's time to step up.
Before I go, is there any comment to that?
Nope, Kevin said.
Got it.
Not one. A few days later, at the auto shop, Adam, Kevin's son, pulled up a video clip about the meeting on his phone. Kevin leaned over the counter to watch and saw himself seated on the stage, silent.
Both those selectmen spoke and pissed people off.
He said, talking about his 2 colleagues on the town's select board.
I sat there and was quiet the whole meeting.
I sat there and was quiet the whole meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
When he was at his shop, Kevin was loud. All the mechanics were, but Kevin was the loudest. "Hey, dumbass," he would say, or, "Hey, jackass." In the garage, the mechanics had to speak over the sound of the radio that was always playing, or the hammering, or the car lift going up and down, or the bells that sounded every time the door opened or the phone rang. Kevin's father, who'd started the business in 1977, had been even louder. If he had a disagreement, he'd throw people out of the shop, screaming mad. But Kevin didn't do that.
There's a difference.
There's a difference between what?
Adam said.
Being loud and screaming.
I've heard him scream.
Jack said.
But not often.
Kevin did not think of himself as an angry person, and he did not share the outrage he'd heard in the auditorium that night, though he knew there were some in town who assumed that he did. It wasn't that he didn't have concerns about the shelter. He worried about how it would affect the already overcrowded school system. He didn't know how teachers were supposed to accommodate dozens of new students who didn't speak English. And he didn't know what might happen to the town's tax revenue if people decided to move away because of the shelter. Taxes were already high. People who'd lived in Norfolk their whole lives, when it was still a town of dairy and chicken farms, were being priced out. But the migrant families themselves...
I wouldn't really say it worries me.
I don't feel they're going to be walking down the
street with knives. I know there are white people from America that are just a bunch of kids. But they're afraid of change and differences.
When it came to politics, Kevin considered himself a conservative. He had run for office to keep taxes from going up year after year and to stop what he saw as unnecessary spending. Now he figured he was probably the most conservative member of the select board. But his idea of government in a town this size wasn't political. Kevin was attracted to the idea of service. He volunteered at town service clubs and did fundraising walks for breast cancer almost every year, once flying to 10 states to walk 600 miles at different Susan G. Komen events. He didn't want to be known as, quote, the Republican on the select board. If he represented one side and not the other, he thought, you're not representing all the people. And that was one reason he'd been so quiet at the public forum. But now his silence had led to another invitation to speak. He had been asked to meet with the Norfolk Republican Town Committee, and he had agreed to the meeting, so long as they knew there wasn't much more he wanted to say about the shelter, at least not until he had more information. I'm going to talk about myself and all that, Kevin said. They want to know Kevin Roach. Except that wasn't what they wanted to know. Instead, the Norfolk Republicans wanted Kevin to talk about why the state had railroaded and handcuffed the town. They asked whether the migrant families moving to Norfolk would be able to just go out and roam the streets and all that. And they wanted to know what Kevin was going to do about it.
I think we do not want this going on.
The chair of the Norfolk Republicans told him.
So, I mean, just don't roll over and die.
Well, we're not. We just can't. We just
want somebody in there fighting for us.
Well, we are fighting for you, but we can't fight out in the street.
Now Bill Crane, an 83-year-old man Kevin knew, stood up to address the room. He ran a local talk show on the town's public access television channel, and before that had been a teacher at a church, where the older students used to complain all the time about Norfolk. They would say,
"It's a stupid little town, and there's nothing to do in Norfolk." And I said to them, now just hold your horses. You're going to grow up, and God willing, live here in Norfolk again, and raise your family here. And you will find that this stupid little town with nothing to do is a safe oasis.
There was no crime here, he said. There were safe, open spaces.
We want to keep Norfolk the way it is. We don't want to see it degraded.
I agree. We don't want crime coming to town and everything else and all that.
Bill seemed satisfied with the answer, and Kevin walked away from the meeting thinking that maybe all the town needed was another opportunity to air its frustrations. The next day, he drove to the town hall building to see Kate O'Brien, who was 39 years old and Norfolk's assistant town administrator. When he got to her office, he asked, "Is there any way we can schedule another public forum?" Kate looked at him from across her desk. "I mean, I can always bring it up," she said. "I feel we have to," he said. Kate, who'd been on stage next to Kevin during the first meeting, had seen her job go from balancing budget items for a town of 11,000 to managing a small corner of the nation's immigration crisis. At the meeting that night, she'd noticed herself shaking, and the physical response had surprised her. She had never thought of Norfolk as a liberal town, but that had never mattered before. It had been 10 years since she'd started to work her way up the ladder of municipal government, attending graduate school at night to get her master's degree. Now the question she was asking herself surprised her too.
Why am I so affected by this? Is this worth it for me, mentally? Is this what I want? Yeah, do I want to be screamed at?
The morning after the forum, she'd found a voicemail waiting for her at the office. It was another angry voice, but instead of screaming, the man on the tape spoke calmly as he used racist slurs to talk about migrants and describe scenes of sexual violence.
My mom always taught me not to wish bad things on people.
Kate heard the man say.
But I hope it comes out to every one of you motherfuckers.
I hear you, she told Kevin now, but Kate did not want to hold another forum yet. It would just be one more opportunity for the people in Norfolk to show how angry they had become. Across town, other people were getting messages too. Thais Bingham Hickman was home with her 2 sons one night when she got a call from an unknown number. When she answered, she heard a man yelling, "Get on your knees," and then she heard him say the N-word, and then she hung up and called the police. When her kids asked why a squad car was parked outside the house that night, and the next day, and the day after that, Thais didn't want to tell them the truth. "Never in my life have I received or experienced anything like that," she wrote on Facebook afterward. The days passed, and across town, more Facebook posts came, followed by fights in the comments sections. One read, "This not safe for anyone business is a barely disguised anti-immigrant trope." Another read, "Don't lock your doors, it's up to you." Another read, "Thank you for clarifying your real issue is the nationality and skin color of those coming." Another replied, "Excuse me, do you know how to read? Where did I say anything about skin color?" A new feeling of anticipation and tension settled over the town. "If people want to reduce anger, which could lead to hate or crime, be nice," one woman wrote online, suggesting people start offering one another a conciliatory smile or wave. Ron Tibbetts liked that idea, but when he'd written his own Facebook post about remembering to, quote, "see the people in all of this," someone else accused him of, quote, "performance kindness," a phrase he'd never heard. Among the most vocal in town, 2 groups formed. On one side, the concerned citizens of Norfolk began selling not safe for anyone yard signs for $10 apiece. On the other, the Norfolk Welcome Wagon decided they should have signs too, except no one could agree on a design. One person said they should be red, white, and blue because the not safe for anyone signs were red, white, and blue. Another person said that might appear adversarial. Another said a neutral color might be better. Another suggested that instead of making new signs, they should pull out the other signs in the middle of the night. Rumors were spreading that the shelter would open soon, but state officials still wouldn't tell the town a date or time. They told Kate they were worried protesters might try to block the roads. At the prison, contractors began working overnight. Razor wire began to come down. More signs went up. Plans formed for a protest in the roundabout on Main Street. Everyone had their own idea of who was about to come to town, including Kevin. He imagined, quote, "a bunch of pregnant women and children, mostly from Haiti, a country he didn't know much about, except to think that it was a dangerous place. He didn't know what language the families would speak, except to think that it wouldn't be English. And he had only heard a few things on the news about what was happening at Terminal E in Logan Airport. But he had seen the inside of the prison. He knew it had a gym, a cafeteria, and bedrooms that looked like dorm rooms, not cells. So he could at least imagine that, for anyone, it would be a better place to sleep than the floor of the airport.
You know, it might be just totally fine.
"30 miles away, on the ground floor of Logan Airport, Terminal E, travelers were passing through a long alcove with floor-to-ceiling windows. There was not much in the alcove, except for a bathroom, 2 hand sanitizer machines, 3 trash cans, and along the wall, a row of crowd control stanchion posts with retractable belts. The floors were clean and polished. Flight attendants passed by. An employee pushed a rack of luggage carts through the hall and disappeared through a back door. Everyone who entered was either arriving or departing, until a man, a woman, and a boy walked into the alcove and stopped. They put their luggage on the floor and sat on the radiator against the wall. The boy ran to and from a trash can. A few minutes later, another family entered and stayed. They took 2 of the stanchions and extended the retractable belts to create a border parallel to the wall. A few minutes after that, another family arrived and did the same. Soon, 3 families became 3 dozen. They opened their suitcases. They pulled out blankets and spread them in neat rows on the floor. They unrolled foam pads. They unpacked pillows, sleeping bags, and more blankets. They dragged more stanchions into place until they connected to create an aisle down the center of the space. These were the people headed to Norfolk, and this was the place where they were living. Every morning, they woke up at the airport, packed everything they owned, and were driven to one of the state's family welcome centers, where they spent the day. Every evening, they returned to the airport, unpacked their things, and slept. One level above, the governor's voice said on loop,
"Hi, this is Governor Maura Healey, and welcome to Massachusetts. Thank you for choosing Boston Logan International Airport."
Along the wall, a 16-year-old girl named Nika watched the nightly routine unfold alongside her mother, her father, her younger sister, several suitcases, and 3 layers of blankets spread out on the floor. She had been at the airport for 18 days now, she said. Her family had left Haiti for Brazil, and they had lived there for 5 years before beginning a journey she described as harrowing, north through the Darien Gap, across the U.S. border, and eventually to Boston, where she had no idea what would happen to her next, outside of life in the airport and the cordoned-off living area that was erected each night and put away again each morning. Nika spoke through a combination of English and a translation app. "Let's say we are living a monotonous life," she said. At night, Nika sat against the wall or played cards with the other families at the airport, or she stared up at the skywalk overhead, where she often saw travelers lean over the railing, taking pictures to post on the internet. Sometimes she saw the posts on Instagram or TikTok with, quote, horrible comments about dirtying their country and being beggars, she said. She knew that in life there were people who tried, quote, to make you believe that you're not normal and you don't fit into their world. And when it happens, you kind of need to walk away. But there was nowhere to go at the airport, so she found other ways. She liked to read romance novels and listen to music. She wrote her own stories and practiced her English by watching videos online. When she saw the posts about the airport, she tried to believe that every person was inherently good, and that she was too. Everyone was good at something, she said. Only, quote, maybe we are not in the right place to develop our talent. Albert Einstein might be considered the most intelligent man of all time, but, quote, think if he went to a city where he needs to fish to survive, she said. If he doesn't know how, will he be considered an idiot for not knowing how to fish in a city where even children know how? Nika's father placed her sister's head on a pillow. At night, the airport got cold, and many of the kids staying there, including Nika's sister, were sick, she said. Quote, people are here out of necessity. It wasn't a choice. Then I woke up one day and I'm going to have an adventure and live in an airport, end quote. She hoped to get a job to help them. And she had other hopes too. To go to school and to one day learn 9 languages. She already knew Portuguese, Creole, Spanish, and some English and French, and she wanted to learn Italian and Mandarin next. Most of all, she wanted this trip to end, and for her, that meant, quote, when I can finally sleep in peace. A house where I know I'll rest after the rush of the day, you know? But I don't think about it too much, end quote. Now it was dark outside, but the lights in the airport stayed on. Nika's sister was asleep. People walked to and from the bathroom to wash up. Flip-flops and sandals lay scattered on the floor. Pizza boxes were passed around. It was almost 9 p.m. Amid the sprawl of suitcases and backpacks, there was a boy holding a balloon, a girl lying on her stomach, her feet dangling in the air, a toddler rolling on the ground, trying to crawl, a man with pages of documents spread out in front of him, a mother and father lying down, a child between them. All around, there were families trying to get to sleep, and in the midst of them, a 16-year-old girl sat alone against the wall. Quote, "Some call me lonely," Nika said, "but I feel more lonely when I'm in a place where I don't fit in, so I prefer to be left alone, because true loneliness is when you're surrounded by people who don't value you."
Jackass.
"Hey, jackass," Kevin said.
There's only one jackass in this room, and it's you.
A mechanic said back.
Oh, yeah.
"Oh, yeah," Kevin laughed. The phone rang. The car lift went up.
Yeah,
The radio was on,
yeah.
as usual,
She's got one in Springfield,
as a
too.
bus pulled
Yeah.
out of the prison. Kevin didn't see it, and if anyone else did, no one called or came by to let him know. Too far to be seen from the road, the bus came to a stop, and the family stepped off and looked around. No one could say for sure how long they would be in Norfolk. The family's stays would be determined case by case, with families leaving and new families arriving on a rolling basis. The one certainty, the first of the migrants were here. At the shop, Kevin kept working. He glanced out the window now and then until it was late afternoon, and 2 miles away, at the center of town, people opposed to the shelter began to gather for their protest. Some held "not safe for anyone" signs. Others held new signs that read "no kids in prison." The plan was to stay until rush hour was over, then drive to the shelter to finish the protest there. People honked as they drove by. Local news cameras arrived. There were several dozen people now, and across the street, on a hill overlooking the roundabout, Kevin stood, watching. He had decided to come after all. Some of the people in the roundabout he recognized, some he didn't, some he heard yelling. Others stood quietly, waving to cars as they passed. There was a woman driving by, holding up her middle finger. "Bye, moron," a protester said. There was a young man, waving through his open car window. Love it, he shouted. There was Thais Bingham Hickman, walking toward a police sergeant she spotted on the lawn, to ask him for an update about the anonymous call. There was Ron Tibbetts, driving by with his wife, taking it all in. There was Kate O'Brien, driving away from town in the other direction, hoping to avoid the protest altogether. On it went, and Kevin kept watching, reminding himself once more that however the town might change, it might be totally fine. Now he turned away from the protest and looked up. He saw dark clouds gathering. The rain fell lightly at first, then harder. Heavy rain washed over the town. It came down on the protesters' signs, which they held above their heads for protection. It covered the roundabout, Kevin's shop, and the prison down the road. It pounded down on the roofs of cars parked nearby, where people at the roundabout were retreating. Some walked, others ran. Cars drove off. The honking stopped. The protests never made it to the prison. As the migrants were settling in for their first night, the roundabout was empty. There was only rain now, and a few abandoned signs on the ground in a small, quiet town where everyone was seeking shelter. This story was written and read by me, Ruby Kramer. The audio version of the story that you just heard was produced with original music by Bishop Sand.